Hey guys, Garvey here. I just finished writing up my most recent film and thought it'd be a fun video to go over some tips and techniques or anything really that helped with the process. Some of these are from books I read while writing, others are just my own personal observation of the craft. All these ideas have obvious exceptions. Rules are meant to be broken, but it's important to know what rules you're breaking. The first mantra that I devised is rhyme, don't repeat. For me, I see films as a very poetic form of art, and a good way to elicit the poetry of a film is to rhyme. And not in the literary sense of Humpty Dumpty had a fall, more so the way the life of Michael Corleone rhymes with the life of his father, Vito Corleone, in The Godfather Part 2. So that's all well and good, but what about the second part? Don't repeat? Well, I found that there were several instances in my film where the rhyming morphed into repetition, where I was going over the same plot points over and over again. Rhyming and repetition are very close to one another on the literary plane. It could be a one-letter difference, really. So I would try to either remove those repetitive scenes or change one letter in the scene to make it a rhythm, a melody. Now, there is a lot of power in repetition, but it should be used minimally. A lot of people are firm believers of the rule of three, which, if you don't know, pretty much means you have something happen twice to set up the audience's expectation for it to happen the same way the third time. But when that third time comes, you subvert their expectation. Personally, I'm more of a fan of the rule of twos, at least in film. You should show Exhibit A and Exhibit B, and the contrast of those two objects or ideas or characters or whatever will elicit the true power of the film. Film is about juxtaposition after all. The next point is something I got while reading Dan O'Bannon's Guide to Screenplay Structure, which I would highly recommend. One of the things he brings up is the transition from one act to another. What exactly determines an act change? Well, for Act 1 to Act 2, it's pretty simple. The major conflict is confirmed and begins. The protagonist's destination is set and they embark on their journey. But what about from Act 2 to Act 3? Well, there should be a game-changing moment from Act 2 to Act 3. The conflict should either be recontextualized and seen in a new light by the characters, or the conflict should evolve to such a degree that it hardly resembles what it looked like in the beginning of the film. Such as in Rocky, where he spends the whole film training for the fight, and then the night before, he recontextualizes it in his brain and thinks, well, maybe I can't win, but as long as I can go the distance, I'll be happy. Or in Star Wars, where at the beginning of the film, Luke just wants to get off Tatooine, but he has these droids that the evil Galactic Empire are looking for. That initial conflict balloons up until Luke has to use his space wizard powers to blow up a planet-destroying weapon. The next idea is to help visualize a story structure, which has always been a very difficult thing to do. I got this idea from a photo online where someone had taken every verse of the Bible and had created a graph, showing every time a verse referenced another verse or had some connection to it. The author of the image stated that he felt the Bible was one of the first hyperlinked documents, where every verse is hyper-connected and linked. I thought it'd be a fun idea to do something similar with my own film. I listed all the scenes and started drawing lines between the scenes that were directly connected. For example, let's say there's a scene where someone's at the hospital. Well, why aren't they at the hospital? Well, maybe they got into a car accident. Well, why did they get into a car accident? Well, maybe he was driving as fast as he could trying to get to the birth of his firstborn child. Well, why was he late to his son's birth to begin with? You see how all these scenes are directly connected? Most stories can have multiple arcs and sub-stories within it. You could have dozens of cause and effect moments graphed out in a film. So once your cause and effect graph is complete, what do you do with it? Well, there's good things to look out for and bad things to look out for. I went through the graph and I counted how many cause and effect connections the scene had. If a scene has a bunch, that means it's an important scene and it's probably pretty good, in terms of the structure of the story at least. It is possible to have an overly complicated scene. Maybe a scene only has one or two connections, maybe none. If a scene is low on connections, maybe just try cutting it out or merging it with another scene. I color-coded all the arcs in my film. So one part of the connection graph would be blue for one sub-narrative, another would be red for another sub-narrative, etc. Typically in a story, you want all the sub-narratives to come together and culminate into one thing, usually near the end of the story. So if you have a sub-narrative that starts at the beginning and ends in the middle, maybe think about just cutting it out, or trying to have that sub-narrative end with the rest of the sub-narratives. The reverse is also true. If you have a sub-narrative come out of nowhere in the middle of the script, maybe try having it begin earlier, or maybe just cut it out. This is probably the most important thing I learned while writing, because visualizing a story structure is usually super difficult, and I'm more of a visual guy, so this kind of graph has been super helpful. These next two tips are for dialogue, which I always struggle with. If you're classically trained in poetry or literature, then you'll probably know about this next one, which is poetic feet. Poetic feet are different ways to arrange syllables to create a foot measure. A foot measure is created by having syllables that are either stressed or unstressed. For example, the word hello has two syllables, hell and low, with the latter syllable being stressed or accented. There are 6 types of foot measures. Iambic, which is an unaccented syllable followed by an accented one. Iambic was used all the time by Shakespeare and is the closest to the natural flow of the English language. It's commonly used to elicit the feeling of passion, perhaps because the flow of it is similar to the beating of the heart. There's also trochee, which is pretty much the exact opposite of iambic, meaning it begins with the accented syllable and is followed by the unaccented syllable. Edgar Allan Poe's poem, The Raven, was written in trochee. This foot measure is often used to give an ominous and dreadful tone. Next is dactyl, which is comprised of 3 syllables. The first one is accented, and the second 2 are unaccented. The words poetry and basketball are both examples of dactyl. A dactyl cadence tends to move swiftly. It gathers force as you speak. So maybe if a certain line of dialogue is leading to some huge reveal, it might be helpful to use a dactyl measure. Those are the 3 big ones. The next 3 are anapest, which is 2 unaccented syllables followed by an accented one. Examples are underfoot and overcome. Then spondy, which is 2 accented syllables, such as hogwild. Finally, there's pyrrhic, which is 2 accented syllables. Now, you probably shouldn't think this deep with every line of dialogue in your script, but for those really big moments, and for those lines you really want to have stick out in people's minds, break it down to foot measures, and maybe try using iambic to make it more passionate, or maybe use trochee to make it a bit spooky. This last trick I developed is a bit silly, but it helps me a ton with writing dialogue. I'll go through the script, and instead of reading it out loud like I usually do, I will sing the dialogue. I'm not going to give an example because I'm a pretty terrible singer, and you're probably better off not hearing me sing prose. But all jokes aside, it's actually very helpful. It really makes it apparent what lines of dialogue are flowing well and which aren't. I think there are 2 reasons why singing the dialogue helps. Firstly, when I'm writing a script, I can go over the same piece of dialogue thousands of times. Eventually, it gets hard to look at it objectively. So I think saying it in a completely different cadence or pitch or singing it really gives you a fresh perspective on what you just wrote. Secondly, I think singing it does exaggerate the underlying properties of the dialogue that aren't as clearly visible when you just read them out loud. Those are 5 things I learned while writing my newest feature film. I hope some of it was useful to you. If you guys liked this video, then I might start doing more videos on the process of filmmaking. If you did, leave a like and a comment down below. Subscribe for more videos like this every Monday. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.